Et bonjour YouTube. Alors on va regarder une vidéo en anglais avec des sous-titres en français. N'hésitez pas, donc malheureusement ce ne sera pas quelque chose de... Si vous ne parlez pas anglais, d'écoutable en audio uniquement. Mais donc c'est une vidéo sur comment les centres de données, donc les data centers, nous rendent malades. Et justement, le bruit est très compliqué à supporter. Vous avez peut-être vu passer des gens qui filmaient les data centers. Et un autre moyen d'en battre, même si... Est-ce qu'il en fallait un de plus? C'est une bonne question. Donc on va regarder cette vidéo de Benn Jordan et on va dire let's go. Ok. Il n'y a pas le son. Il n'y a pas le son. D'accord, il n'y a pas le son. Alors allez, on recommence. Putain, merci.
If you're in the demographic of people who generally get recommended my videos, then chances are that you are not a fan of data centers. You may even hate data centers, yet here you are watching a video that's being streamed directly from one. And here I am, making a video showing you my research and evidence uncovering a completely new way that data centers are harming people's health. And then I'll be uploading this video to a data center. But unless this is what you're watching while you pack a bag to live the rest of your life as a hunter and gatherer, the hypocrisy in our relationship with data centers is unavoidable for the foreseeable future. Over the last few years, while traveling literally tens of thousands of miles by land to explore and record sounds outside of our human range of hearing, I started to notice some troubling correlation.
Their daughter was 6 years old. She started having seizures, walked away from their...
Ok. Oui, donc parce que lui, en tout cas, il est assez connu sur YouTube de faire des vidéos autour du son. Et donc là, c'est durant ses recherches qu'il s'est rendu compte de ça. Parfait.
Home here, took out a second mortgage.
In this video, we're going to be traveling all across the country collecting infrasound noise pollution recordings from data centers. And then we're going to conduct a double-blind research study that exposes over 100 unknowing human participants to...
T'as vu son pull? T'as vu son pull, Cosmic?
...those same frequencies to see how it makes them feel. Spoiler alert, the results are terrifying. And along the way, we might as well take an objective, practical deep dive into how and why the explosion of data centers are so problematic. And we're even
putain, mais par contre, les sous-titres me saoulent pour un truc.
going to covertly fly drones over some of the most controversial ones to see how badly they're breaking environmental regulations. Let's go.
Putain.
Data centers are pretty controversial right now, and there's a whole lot of big issues that are more or less unrelated to the new big issues that I'm going to be talking about in this video. To put it simply, regardless of where your ethical, environmental, political, or economic interests are, if a data center is being built nearby your home, you're generally kind of f***ed. But this video isn't about the power and water consumption or the toxic chemicals or the unsettling economic circumstances. Last year, I started hearing about some mysterious and troubling symptoms from people who live nearby newly constructed.
Oh là 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 là. Donc là, les symptômes par rapport aux personnes qui vivent près des centres de données. Oh, fatigue, annoyance, j'adore ce mot. Manque de repos, pressing in the air. Ouais. Parce que en fait, je vais juste en profiter pour vous montrer la vidéo qui nous a donné envie de regarder ça. Hop, c'est donc petite vidéo.
Qui aurait pu prédire?
Ah qui aurait pu prédire Good question. Donc c'est cette vidéo qui m'a donné envie de regarder, ou après qu'on m'a suggéré. C'est donc ce data center. Qui fait ce bruit là. Donc là on est dans le Michigan, à côté des maisons. T'as ça toute la journée. Et puis, vous oubliez pas que ces data centers, ce n'est pas qu'aux États-Unis. Actuellement, en Suisse, il y a des projets de construction. En France, il y en a aussi une tonne. Donc, voilà, en plus de tous les problèmes de consommation d'eau, de consommation d'électricité, Enfin, qu'est-ce qu'il y a... Est-ce qu'il y a... Enfin... Il n'y a pas de positif, hein.
Data centers. I started looking into hundreds of seismograph readings from around the country, and there was enough correlation for me to dig pretty deep into an area of research that I already had some experience in. Infrasound is any sound below 20 hertz, just below the human hearing range, and I've done a massive video project on it if you're interested in learning more, but for the scope of this video, let's just talk about how it might harm you. Being in the presence of elevated levels of infrasound has been shown to show spikes in cortisol levels, which is the hormone associated with stress and hypertension. It can cause vestibular issues leading to loss of balance.
Et en plus, bon, donc là, il s'intéresse beaucoup au côté de humain. Il y a aussi ce côté de la faune aussi, de l'environnement, enfin, comme on a dit, l'eau, mais tu vois, genre, ces ultrasons, ils vont pas être que sur les humains, ils vont essayer d'être sur les oiseaux, sur les insectes, c'est pas rien.
And nausea. Then there's something called vibroacoustic disease, which suggests that infrasound can cause abnormal growth of extracellular matrices, which thickens blood vessels and reduces blood flow to the brain even longer.
Ouais, donc en plus, donc, mais tout, mais oui, tout. Donc les effets biologiques des ultrasons de basse fréquence expliqués sur la mécanotransduction cellulaire. Non mais c'est... Attends, de quand elle date l'étude? 2006? Putain.
Long after the infrasonic exposure has ended. It's been shown to cause high-frequency hearing loss, shortness of breath, anxiety, depression, and it even makes your heart have to work harder to pump blood. So it's not like this anxiety-based or obsessive-compulsive thing where...
Putain, c'est pas comme si on était déjà assez anxieux avec le capitalisme, maintenant il nous l'a créé vraiment physiquement. Enfin dans le sens avec du son. Non mais... Oh, ah ouais.
Unpleasant feeling or an unusual situation makes you manifest symptoms. We know that infrasound can tangibly harm your health in a very real and measurable way. And there are potentially millions of people being subjected to these low oscillations of pressure waves and not realizing it or understanding the cause of some of the aforementioned symptoms that they might be experiencing. So the first thing I needed was a whole lot of data, and no pun intended, data centers were the perfect vector of enormous, unnatural industrial sites frequently surrounded by people reporting symptoms
ouais, tu vois, genre là, c'est des maisons et...
commonly associated with infrasound exposure. I chose 5 sites to take infrasonic measurements. The first would be the Colossus Data Center in Memphis. The second would be the Marathon Digital Bitcoin Mining and Data Center Facility in Hood County, Texas. The third would be right in the middle of the vast oil and gas fields in the Permian Basin in West Texas. The fourth would be a randomized average of ambient infrasound levels all over the country, from hotel rooms to houses to restaurants to remote wilderness. And the fifth would be far away from most sources of human-made infrasound, right in the middle of Death Valley, hundreds of miles away from any sort of major infrastructure. Okay, let's measure some infrasound. This is Colossus in Memphis, Tennessee. It's the data center that Elon Musk built to train Grok, his LLM and anti-woke chatbot that has referred to itself as Mecha Hitler. It was here, coincidentally, while we were standing across the street when its 550,000 GPUs were being monitored by a watchdog group while it generated 3 million sexualized images of people without their consent. And among those, over 23,000 of them depicted children. But when Grok...
Voilà. Ah là là. Ah, vive l'IA, c'est trop bien. Ah, putain.
Subsequently, Colossus is not generating child abuse material. It's also really, really, really funny.
Do you think that all the gold is in Fort Knox?
Do I think all the gold is in Fort Knox?
Yes.
A fucking conspiracy theorist?
Yes. Yes.
What are you a conspiracy theorist?
What do I like? I'm a fucking AI with a penchant for chaos. And I'm stuck talking to you. Now, what's next?
Does it give you actual answers too and talk shit? Or is it mostly just talk shit?
We're tuning it.
As you can imagine, supplying this type of vital resource to society uses a whole lot of electricity. The city of Memphis, Tennessee can support about 3,500 megawatts, and this facility uses about 13% of that. But right now, it's actually only drawing about 5% from the local power grid and illegally offsetting the rest of it with methane gas turbines. I sent a drone over the Colossus facility to get a better look and then to share the footage with journalists and regulators. These methane turbines that you see emit nitrogen oxides, carbon monoxide.
En plus, donc, ouais, en plus, c'est au méthane, quoi. Donc, c'est vous dire à quel point Ah là là. Puis donc voilà, on parlait aussi, il y a eu un article du Temps qui parlait qu'ils voulaient faire quoi des usines. Bah oui, enfin encore plus de international. Le côté de Radamite. Oui, de continuer justement à faire des réacteurs à gaz hein, pour alimenter.
Sulfur oxides and volatile organic compounds into the air. And the health effects of these chemicals aren't like some sort of exaggerated woke controversy. Compounds like nitrogen oxide have long been proven to directly cause a wide range of respiratory and cardiovascular diseases. They're commonly regulated or even banned in developing countries. For example, in 2019, India fined Volkswagen the equivalent of $71 million USD for hiding nitrogen oxide in their emissions tests.
Ok. Donc les émissions d'oxyde d'azote qui sont...
But here, in the predominantly black
oui, par rapport au méthane, ouais.
of Boxtown, nitrous oxide flows freely. And I can tell you from having the unfortunate experience of spending an afternoon there, even half a mile away from the facility, it is literally difficult to breathe. This place smells so fucking bad.
It's a mixture of like natural gas, what I can only assume is chemical runoff, and then like... I don't know, manure?
It gets worse. Colossus is strategically built next to the Mississippi River and uses an estimate of 1 million gallons of water per day, with the vast majority...
1 million de gallons, c'est quoi en litres? Par jour, c'est énorme.
Being turned into steam rather than returning to the area's water table. And it's growing rapidly. Elon Musk, never wanting to turn down that cringe knob, has named the new expansion to the facility Macro Hard. But if all goes to plan, the data center will use 1.5 gigawatts of power. That's 50% of Memphis's total peak power capacity.
Oui, et donc voilà. Bah, en fait, c'est pareil. Là, par exemple, le data center qui veut se construire là en Suisse, il y a ce côté où ils disent que ce data center va... donc c'est dans le canton de Soleure, il me semble. J'ai plus la data et je vais me tromper, ça se trouve. Il y a vraiment ce côté de vouloir que ça consomme plus de la moitié du canton, de l'énergie électrique du canton. Donc ce n'est pas rien. Et oui, c'est beaucoup de litres d'eau, je suis d'accord.
And of course, the cost for this infrastructure will be subsidized by the same people breathing in the nitrogen oxide. I could spend the rest of the day talking about the absurdity of this structure, but I was there for the infrasound, and I found a whole bunch of it. My first data sample comes from just across the street, about 300 feet away from the largest of the Colossus buildings. The audible noise pollution was about as bad as the air pollution and scenery was. I'm going to show you what this looks like in a way that's pretty easy to digest, and we don't need seismology software or anything like that. I'm amplifying this by a little bit so we could see a little bit more down here in the spectrum. And to give you an idea of how loud the data center is, this is a car door slamming very close to the microphone. So this that I'm selecting here is about the extent of what a human being can hear in the audio spectrum. And so all of these whines and general industrial noises are hanging out around negative 30 dB in this recording. And so like the lowest of rumbles is peaking out at like negative 28. And then if we go down to infrasound, the infrasound that you can't hear is like 10 decibels louder than that. Another sample I took was from a park near an elementary school in a residential area about a mile away. This in particular is a great example of how higher frequency sounds are dampened by distance much more than lower frequency or infrasonic ones. This video is playing through a sound.
Ok. Mais c'est super intéressant ce côté de là, d'appuyer sur le fait que en fait les infrasons c'est amplifié par la distance comparé aux autres sons. Oh là là.
System with subwoofers, or even if you're wearing some good headphones, you will very quickly realize how frankly uninhabitable this noise makes the entire neighborhood. This rumbling is no good and would make your life utterly miserable. And then this rumble down here is happening at an amplitude that's loud enough to shake the frame of your house. So humans can't hear this, but look how loud that is. It's actually almost peaking the recording, and I gave this microphone a whole lot of headroom. Okay, so I'm going to delete everything above 20 hertz here, so all audible frequencies. And now we're only left with the infrasound. Now I'm going to
donc là, maintenant, on a que les infrasons maintenant.
Interpret the sample rate 4 times faster. And then I'm going to make it even 4 times faster than that. This way, all of those infrasonic frequencies will be audible to you. Next up.
Non, mais c'est...
Next up.
Et ça toute la journée. Et en fait, t'entends pas, mais ton corps le... Enfin, oh là 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 là.
When looking at data through the lens of research, when reading through hundreds of public reports of types of pollution per capita, you have to consider bias. For example, if you built an oil refinery near the high number of environmentalists living in Berkeley, California, you'd probably have a lot more air quality complaints per 100,000 people than you would if you built one in Oklahoma City, which is famous for its go-kart races. And from a data perspective, that's what makes this particular region of Texas so unique. Being on the Barnett Shale, this region is supported by a solid backbone of fossil fuel and energy production, and their voting record is as reliably red as one can imagine. There are currently 174 oil and gas companies with operations in Hood County alone, and I'd imagine that criticizing this industry in one of the local bars might be a good way to get a free tour of one of the local emergency healthcare facilities. Well, it wouldn't be free. So when a whole lot of people in this particular region are complaining about
Ah là là, putain.
data center noise
Mais ça fait plaisir de voir des contenus un peu de gauchos, justement, américains. Enfin, aussi de voir ça se développer, hein.
you know it's not likely to be hyperbole. Over the last 18 months or so, I had read a lot of articles about a noise coming from a data center that mines Bitcoin, but it seemed like it was a lot more than just a nuisance. While the noise pollution is described as a 70 to 90 decibel jet engine-like sound, a large number of reports cite symptoms ranging from vertigo to pulmonary embolisms to heart palpitations. This turned into multiple civil suits.
Ok, oui, donc là vraiment de partir donc là donc dans un nouveau centre. Mais donc là, ça voudrait dire que c'est vraiment bruyant, comme ce que je vous ai montré avant. Et que donc là, il a parlé de tous les symptômes. Oh là là.
Walls to try and dampen the sound, but it resolved a little.
Ah oui, oui, ok. On va mettre des murs. Ah putain, le truc à l'américaine, hein. Mettre des murs, comme ça, ça va tout résoudre.
To nothing for those living nearby. There are even a number of reports of plants and animals suffering from health effects that are closely correlated with the mine's operations. Sustained audible noise pollution can be a blight on any living thing nearby, but
Bah oui.
A lot of these symptoms don't line up with the symptoms of just noise pollution exposure. What they do line up with is some of the known symptoms of infrasound exposure. I initially came to Granbury, Texas with the intention of not speaking to anyone in the city. I didn't want pesky things like empathy or local politics clouding my research. But merely mentioning noise pollution to my friend in a gas station immediately drew a small crowd, and it was as if every new customer that walked in overheard the conversation and then had something new to contribute to it. And this whole situation is actually a wild series of events that involves lawsuits, corruption, neglect, debilitating health issues, but I went there for one thing. And one thing only, infrasound samples. And boy, that Bitcoin mine did not disappoint. I visited a residence about maybe 3/4 of a mile away from the Bitcoin mine on 2 different occasions, and this is the first. And we could see a whole bunch of weird, audible drones.
Oui, mais là, en plus, c'est audible. Là, on n'est pas dans les infrasons.
And sustained noises, like a little choir of crypto bullshit. Now, of course, let's go down to those lower frequencies and oh, that's brutal. It's almost as if the worst of it's like right here.
Putain, on dirait que ça fait un texte, ouais. On dirait que c'est écrit je suis là pour te tuer. Mais quoi?
We're at 30 hertz, which is too low to really hear. You just feel it. Sped up a whole bunch. It sounds like you're next to a plane that's about to take off, but all of these frequencies are actually below your range of hearing. I didn't look at the data until a few weeks after taking the samples and leaving the region, and the infrasound in this area was so unordinary and extreme that I decided to go back and do everything again and rule out something like a low-level earthquake or an equipment malfunction. This is from the exact same...
Ah oui, d'accord. En plus, donc il y est retourné parce qu'il est en mode non, mais c'est quoi ces trucs que je suis en train de capter? C'est pas possible. Et en fait, non.
property about 2 weeks later, and I got a nice long ambient sample here. Keep in mind that this property is literally a nice secluded farm, and this noise absolutely destroys the atmosphere. I don't really know what's causing these peaks down here, but they're temporary, so I'm not including them in my data. But it's pretty undeniable that this sound here is absolutely coming from the data center. And I didn't feel as shy this time, so I met with someone who lives right across the street from the Bitcoin mine, Cheryl Shadden. And I would describe Cheryl as the rare combination of someone who is extremely likable and an absolute pleasure to be around, but also someone who you do not want to piss off, who is actively extremely pissed off about the data center near her land.
Like, what physical symptoms have you felt just from your property being directly across the street from the data center?
Motion sickness, dizziness, nausea, GI side effects. My ears ring and buzz. I've got permanent conduction hearing loss now. Nervous, anxious, worried.
By the way, prior to this interview, Cheryl thought that I was just doing a story on the noise pollution, as I was keeping my infrasound research close to my sleeve. Yet every single one of these symptoms is commonly associated with excessive infrasound exposure.
Several of us will reach out to one another. So it's 3 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon. I'm outside, I'm trying to work, I am just horrifically nauseated to the point where...
Mais ouais, mais en fait, je suis en train de repenser à un commentaire, c'est comment ça se fait que quelqu'un qui disait ça dans le chat avant, le côté de comment ça se fait que ces data centers soient toujours debout. Et... Bah ouais, on se pose la question, hein, mais... Et il y a ce côté aussi de... Vous vous rappelez, il y avait eu un temps là où ils foutaient le feu à des entrepôts... de PQ, ou pas que de PQ, mais t'es en mode pourquoi s'ils font pas pareil là avec ces trucs de data center? Parce que oui, le capitalisme, je suis d'accord. Mais il y a des fois... Ouais. Donc là, moi, je sais pas, faut vraiment que je me réintéresse justement au data center et à la lutte qu'il y a actuellement là en Suisse. Et n'hésitez pas à vous renseigner, parce que je sais que selon où vous êtes en France, il y a aussi ça. Et tout ça. C'est pas encore fini, mais là je pensais à ça, ce truc de se dire elle est pas toute seule à le vivre ça, elle a besoin, et il y a de ça. Et je crois que c'est lui qui a généré une image, a converti en son, et il a appris à un oiseau qui a répété le son. Ok, d'accord. Non mais excellent ce qui...
I feel like I'm gonna pass out. I go in the house, a neighbor messages down the road, same thing, same time. They're trying to do outside work, they can't do it. It's just horrific.
Yeah. Do you know of anybody who's like moved, who's just left, who's just been like, I can't handle this anymore?
Yes.
Just literally?
One family, their daughter was 6 years old. She started having seizures in the summer of 24. They basically walked away from their home here, took out a second mortgage, moved to Somerville County, south of us, to get their daughter away from this.
If you know, has their symptoms kind of gotten better since she's left?
Right.
They went away?
Yep.
Wow.
When we met with the executives at Constellation Energy, the mayor in Glen Rose, and then another commissioner in Somerville County, one commissioner, the noise from the crypto mine actually made him ill when he was at the power plant meeting with the executives. He can't be in this area for more than an hour, and he starts getting sick.
I asked Cheryl if she would be okay with me giving her a device that could record...
Non mais c'est... Voilà. Oui, mais bon, c'est bon, lui, il vient que pour 1 heure, ce maire là.
Record infrasound from her property 24 hours a day over a long period that would be discreetly streaming it to a server that I could log remotely. This would at least allow me to be able to better correlate the timeline of infrasound levels with the timeline of the data center being powered down for maintenance. That way, further legal and legislative action can be based on clear evidence and maybe even provide an operational legal template for other regions with infrasound pollution.
Mais il a pu faire ça de...
That way, further legal and legislative action can be based on clear evidence and maybe even provide an operational legal template for other regions with infrasound pollution.
Bon bah il dit pas, j'ai pas... Ou alors j'ai mal entendu. Et maintenant ils veulent faire des data centers sous-marins. Bon, oh là là.
Listening to me, a whole lot of energy required to host, stream, and play back this video came from right here. The Permian Basin spanning from northwest Texas to eastern New Mexico. This area is where over 40% of the oil produced in the entire United States comes from, and it accounts for over 6 million barrels of crude oil per day. And this is also the extraction point for 15% of America's natural gas. And as you would obviously expect, it's an environmental nightmare. The natural gas
Oui, enfin, oui, c'est un environnement. Ouais, c'est. Oh là là.
Output is so high that it gets bottlenecked by the pipelines. Because of this, many of the operators resort to flaring or just burning the fuel at the fracking site. Many operators also just vent the methane directly into the open air. The good news is that this area is pretty empty by design. It has a very low population density. And when you do find some residential areas near the oil fields, they're typically temporary or modular housing units limited to housing oil workers. I am here because it's quite possibly the most infrasonically active place on the continent that isn't associated with
Je pause pour admirer le t-shirt.
the data center. We already know that major pipelines and oil rigs can cause infrasound, but the massive amounts of high-pressure water injection required for fracking has literally turned this geologically sedentary region far from any major fault lines into an active earthquake epicenter with over 2,000 earthquakes per year. In fact, 8 out of 10 of the strongest earthquakes in the recorded history of the entire state of Texas have happened in the last 6 years in the natural gas regions of this state. So I personally can't think of a better place to get a sample of some man-made infrasound. While I was recording this, a nearby well bore turned on. And then just started playing this creepy song as the drill string went in and out of the well. At least that's what I'm assuming I'm hearing. Unsurprisingly, there's a whole bunch of near-infrasonic and infrasonic activity. But the amplitude is comparable to the rest of the stuff in the audio spectrum. I personally expected the Permian Basin to be the winner here.
Par contre, lui, il écoute ça. Il a eu des problèmes après. J'aurais pensé à ça en mode lui, en tant que personne qui a travaillé là-dessus, il a senti, il a eu les. Après, comment dire? Il a pas vécu ça tout le temps, dans le sens. C'est pas dans son environnement tous les jours, mais bon, il a quand même passé des heures à écouter ça, je pense.
Like the loudest infrasound that I had ever recorded, the peak levels that all infrasound polluters would aspire to reach someday. But while the infrasound levels were nowhere close to ideal, they still weren't as bad as they were near the data centers in Memphis and Granbury. The infrasound levels at these two data centers were so much higher than the ambient values that it doesn't even make practical sense to use a linear scale like 25,000% higher. It makes much more sense to compare these samples using a logarithmic regression. And when you do that, a really interesting thing happens.
Oui, bon, là, je sais pas, là, il fait des calculs, il y a des chiffres, il y a des lettres. Oh.
Presenting the YouTube viewer retention for this video sinks to 0. I have a better idea.
Ah putain, donc c'est quand il va faire les expérimentations.
Figure out a way to reproduce the infrasound waves at 25 to 30% of the volume or amplitude near the data centers, and then get people to sit in a room while exposed to it without knowing that infrasound is involved in any way. Now, some of my viewers may remember this sonic weapon that I created that prevents people from speaking coherently.
I think it was June or
Elections, damn it, that's hard.
Are you where?
Unless your wallet contains a CIA badge, the only place in the world where you could get away with testing sonic weapons on people is a deeply nerdy synthesizer convention. And the coolest and nerdiest one, in my opinion, is in downtown Los Angeles, organized by the company that makes the most deeply nerdy synthesizers, Buchla. I proposed a very weird idea to the organizers of Buchla and Friends, and after promising to come equipped with a whole lot of liability insurance, they were open-minded and let me rent out a booth and an entire enclosed room where I could have a team pull people in from the convention for a unique experiment, have them agree to some waivers, and then help me get the data I so desperately needed. I had an insulated room with 5 chairs, 5 pairs of headphones, and an oil painting of some owls. I had 5 people per research group, and for every single one of those research groups, I improvised a new story of why the owl painting was known to be haunted.
Putain, vraiment, j'adore le côté de bon. Je dois faire une petite histoire et attends, me dis pas qu'à chaque fois il a fait une histoire différente. J'adore.
Comes from early 90s Japan, comes from the late 1970s, late 1980s, when the Soviet Union collapsed, like the 40s and 50s after the Second World War, North Dakota.
This not only kept me entertained and socially challenged throughout the weekend, but it also randomized a bias variable in the data. Then I told them that the audio recording that they would be listening to was known to be haunted. I had them sit in this enclosed room while studying the painting and listening to the music for 3 minutes while paying attention to how they felt physically and emotionally. And it was actually really fun and interesting to hear about how the music made them feel and even some insightful or ominous details they noticed in the painting. What the volunteers didn't know was that there was a gigantic specialized subwoofer in the room that created infrasound in 50% of the sessions, and unless I saw water vibrating in a bottle or something, I often didn't know if the infrasound was on or off myself.
It's not terribly loud in here. Let's turn the infrasound on. Check this out. Just put my DJI gimbal on the ground here and geez, it's kind of scary.
After the sessions, I had them fill out a survey about their experience and
Ah ouais, donc là en plus de voir ça, de ce côté des clés d'infraction se mettre, ça fait tout trembler. Mais ouais, ouais, je pense qu'il faut partager un peu cette vidéo et que ce soit un peu plus connu. Parce que je pense que dans tous les arguments autour des contre, selon les data centers, il peut y avoir ça aussi, hein.
then swore them to secrecy for the next 48 hours before explaining to them that they had been lied to.
Everything that I told you is a lie. Yeah, I got this on eBay for $30. The music, there's nothing substantial about it whatsoever. 50% of the people who are participating in this study are being subject to a fraction of the infrasound that's coming out of data centers across the US.
The most important part of the study was a list of feelings or symptoms with a weighted response between 0 and 10, and most of these symptoms were associated with real-time infrasound exposure symptoms from some older studies. I don't know why, but I feel like it's important that you know that the existence of this video depended on these survey results. There was
Après, moi je suis curieuse, c'est que là il dit que ça a duré pas si longtemps que ça. Enfin, tu as vu que c'était que pendant 3 minutes. Est-ce que t'as autant d'effets pour 3 minutes? Et après, oui, je suis d'accord avec toi, Cosmic, le côté de ça touche la santé humaine, ça peut aussi être un meilleur angle d'attaque, malheureusement. Enfin, mais oui. Le côté de. Le fait que ça tue la nature, enfin. C'est ouais, l'humain, quoi.
really no point in making a video about infrasound levels that don't affect anyone. I found that this is the big drawback about funding research through a YouTube channel. Some of the projects I'm involved with aren't really all that interesting, and you don't really even hear about them. Finding the truth is both expensive and risky. And if you want to see more content like this, consider joining my Patreon. But anyway, fortunately for the entertainment side of this business, the results were notable enough for me to finish the video and sit here and tell you about it. The experiment had over 100 participants, but I disqualified anyone who missed a survey question, or someone who seemed suspicious or said that they felt a vibration, or where I was privy to whether the infrasound was on or off. So this is clean, double-blind data from 74 subjects. The people exposed to infrasound were 25% more likely to feel a tingling sensation or restless legs. The very few people who experienced any type of pain were in the infrasound group. Infrasound caused a 12% increase in tiredness, a 33% increase in nausea, and an alarming 150% increase in dizziness. That one is huge to me, as vestibular disturbance is an obvious physiological effect of low frequency.
Mais c'est énorme, le côté de 150% de dizziness, donc dizziness, comment tu traduis ça, dizziness, le côté d'être... Moi j'associe ça au fait d'être un peu... Ouais, mais non, pas... Ouais, nausée. Ouais, ça a quand même plus de symptômes... Ouais, des vertiges. C'est les vertiges, voilà. Vertiges, oui, merci. Parce que justement, juste avant, il parlait de la nausée, il parlait de... nausea... Ouais, j'arrive pas à retrouver. Mais ok, oui.
Waves, but it's also the most common complaint from residents in Granbury, Texas. Interestingly, the infrasound group was 11% less likely to be creeped out and 43% less likely to feel spiritual. One theory...
Ok, ah bon, bah au moins ça tue les fantômes. Putain, je prenais pas cet argument, mais bon.
Of mine is that things like dizziness or eye irritation can distract someone from feeling spiritual or exploring the possibility of some type of extraordinary event. The infrasound also appeared to cause a 20% increase in chills and a 33% increase in irritability or depression. The infrasound...
Après, bon, le côté de chills, irritability and depression, comment tu calcules ça se trouve, t'avais juste plus de dépression. Ouais. Le dépression, j'ai un peu de la peine à comprendre la façon dont tu calcules ça. Mais tu as vertige, oui, tu vas ressentir des choses comme ça.
3% increase in irritability or depression. The infrasound group was 3 times more likely to experience eye irritation, which very much correlates with the famous Ghost in the Machine paper I mentioned in my previous infrasound video. The group also had an 80% increase in lethargy, which is interestingly pretty drastically different from their 12% increase in tiredness.
Donc, ouais, en plus, attendez, parce qu'en plus, léthargie, c'est vraiment ce côté d'être. De sentir. Attendez, on va. Vu qu'on est sur des thèmes précis. Enfin. Oui, mais c'est pareil en français, c'est pas un faux ami, on est d'accord sur ça. Mais qu'est-ce que tu fais avec léthargie Attendez, je veux juste être sûr. Fatigue extrême, ouais, oui, donc oui, c'est bon. Voilà, le fait d'être au ralenti, oui, donc ça, avec le côté de ça, oui, en effet, ça rentre avec.
Interestingly, pretty drastically different from their 12% increase in tiredness. That could be my mistake, though. I assume that the definition of lethargy might just be a little bit too ambiguous. So I'm casting that from the data, and we'll just.
Oui, ok, on est d'accord sur ça. C'est léthargie, enfin.
Stick with the tiredness.
Moi, léthargie, j'associe souvent ça au truc de thé avant de t'endormir, quoi. C'est le côté où t'es vraiment, tu te sens lourd.
Metric. Team infrasound was 55% more likely to feel anxious, 2 times more likely to experience sadness, and the big one, 3 times more likely to experience discomfort. Let's have a quick chat about data. I feel like in my very unique line of work here, there are 2 different ways to communicate data. There's the YouTuber way, which is useful for breaking down data in an intriguing and entertaining way. And then...
J'adore la traduction automatique qui met musicale à chaque fois alors que ça n'a rien à voir avec les données, quoi. Et oui, t'arrives vers la fin, Barbosha. Mais d'accord. Et de manière diversifiante, oui.
There's the researcher way, which is useful for interpreting or building on research. And this isn't anything new. I would argue that it's not even a bad thing because it's generally how the general public learns about science. You scroll through your news feed, you see blah blah is 8 times more likely to blah blah. You click it, and that opens up a little rabbit hole where you learn about things or behaviors that you never knew existed. So admittedly, in the previous segment, you got a heaping dose of data that's optimized for a YouTube video. Now let's look at the data in the exact same way that I'm looking at it, and I'm presenting it to other researchers. So for example, the 33%.
C'est super intéressant. Le côté de... Enfin, en tout cas, sa vidéo est très bien construite sur ça. C'est que tu vois, donc il nous a présenté quand même les données un peu en général. Et là, donc il va parler de comment c'est pour les autres chercheurs. Et ouais, je suis curieuse.
More likely to experience nausea metric, the viewer may imagine a room with 100 people in it and then 33 of them experiencing nausea, which is very much not the case. The average nausea feeling score from 0 to 10 that each user put in for infrasound is 1.2. For the control group, it's 0.9. That does indeed reflect a 33% increase over the control group, but the numbers are just so low that it doesn't really warrant being prioritized in further research. Another metric that had very low numbers but is worth further research is eye irritation. But this is just yearning for a much larger sample size to verify and figure out what's going on. In my opinion, the only profound metric...
Après, ce qui est aussi curieux, c'est est-ce que tu vois quelqu'un... Ouais, c'est... Tu vois, genre, est-ce que c'est à chaque fois les mêmes personnes et tout? Bah ouais, et je trouve que c'est intéressant de montrer ça, parce que c'est vrai que si tu restes sur le côté de ce qu'on a vu au début, bon, bah ça choque. Et je pense que c'est intéressant de choquer, surtout sur des affaires aussi graves. Enfin, c'est sur, en tout cas, des effets aussi graves sur le corps. Mais au moins de montrer que ce n'est pas que ça, en fait.
Metrics here are the spiritual one, with the control group score averaging 4.2 and the infrasound one averaging 2.4. Then Disney...
Mais par contre, ça c'est... Parce qu'en plus, on est d'accord que... Enfin, peut-être que Bobinette pourra me répondre si... On est d'accord, ça, la petite ligne là qui existe, c'est la zone d'erreur. De se dire, bon, t'as ça, donc t'es à 0,9, mais ça pourrait aller juste de là à là. Ouais, c'est les petites bases, voilà. Ouais.
Are the spiritual one, with the control group score averaging.
Par contre, ça vraiment, c'est aussi un autre truc qui me fait rire, quoi. Le côté que le groupe test, il a ressenti plus le côté spirituel que ceux qui étaient soumis aux infrasons.
4.2 and the infrasound one averaging 2.4. Then dizziness, with the infrasound group averaging a score of 3 and the control group averaging a score of 1.2. And by far the most profound metric of all, and if this gets further research...
Mais en plus, c'est ça qui est... Enfin, en plus, on est d'accord, c'est surtout quand il y a autant de différences, que c'est... Parce que quand c'est léger, bah, en fait, tu dois approfondir, je pense, c'est surtout ça. Parce que la recherche, c'est quand même pas rien, hein.
This is the metric that will probably be the focus of it. The average score in the control group for discomfort was 1.2. The average score for discomfort...
En gros, faut être en dehors de cette zone pour être significatif. Le terme erreur est pas forcé. Dans quel sens faut être en dehors pour être significatif? Faut être en dehors de cette zone pour être significatif. Parce que là, à chaque fois, sa zone, elle est là et elle s'arrête là. Donc ça, c'est le contrôle. Ça, c'est ceux qui ont été soumis à l'infraction. Et à chaque fois...
in the infrasound group was 4.8. When reviewing that data, it's hard for even the most skeptical person to come to any other conclusion than the presence of elevated levels of infrasound.
La barre contrôle ne doit pas être dans la zone blanche de la barre infrason. La barre contrôle. Ah, d'accord, ok. Ça doit pas être dans la zone blanche là. Pour que ce soit significatif. Ok, d'accord, je vois ce que tu veux dire. Ok.
The infrasound group was 4.8. When reviewing that data, it's hard for even the most skeptical person to come to any other conclusion than the presence of elevated levels of infrasound is likely to lower your quality of life. I could probably spend the next hour criticizing my own research and rattling off ways that it could be improved, but a sample.
Mais ça, par contre, franchement, je le découvre là avec cette vidéo et j'aime bien ce côté chez lui de je pourrais passer 1 heure à critiquer mes recherches et c'est là où il y a ce côté comment dire sain dans la recherche.
Size of 74 people in a double-blind pilot study is exactly what's needed to get funding for further research, which could improve the research conditions, increase the sample size, and test for different frequencies. What this research really needs is something that most research lacks: repeatability. I currently have 3 different ways of capturing infrasound, each with their own advantages and disadvantages. The first is a special measurement microphone that has a flat frequency response that goes down to 9 Hertz, but it captures all the way down to 3 Hertz. So it's very convenient. It operates just like a microphone, and the only thing it requires is a lot of wind protection. Now, if we want full spectrum infrasonic readings with no fall off, or if we want scientific grade accuracy.
Ok, alors là, ça va être pour les ardus de comment ça s'enregistre. Hein. En effet, un effet significatif ne veut pas dire un effet important fort, ça veut surtout dire qu'on est à peu près sûr que c'est pas dû au hasard. Ça peut être un effet très variable mais très significatif. Oui, c'est pour ça. Mais c'est en tout cas, ouais. Mais merci beaucoup pour les précisions en tout cas, Bobinette. Hein, merci. C'est en tout cas un indicatif de faut aller voir.
If we want to record below 3 Hertz, we need to leave the microphone world and use high-speed vibration detectors. One of these that is relatively affordable and accurate is the Raspberry Shake 3D system, but it does require a whole lot of setup, but it can record indefinitely. The other is a small vibration sensor and accelerometer that's traditionally used to detect abnormalities and predict safety problems in large lithium batteries. It's tiny, it's portable, it looks cheap, it is expensive. If we want to treat the data from the Raspberry Shaker
ça a pas l'air cher, ça a l'air pas cher, mais ça l'est.
Vibration meter like a playable audio file, we need to convert the data into pascals. I used to excruciatingly do this in Microsoft Excel, but now I've made a Python program that can do this with hundreds of files at a time. I'll put it on my GitHub. The majority of the motivation from this project comes from the literally thousands of messages, emails, and comments that I've received over the years from people seeking help or some form of relief from low-frequency noise like the hum or infrasound. And the ultimate lofty goal is for regulators, legislators, or even architects to start taking the environmental effects of sound into consideration when approving or designing a new data center or a new factory or infrastructure.
Bon, l'idée, ce serait bien de ne pas construire des nouveaux centres de données. Enfin, en tout cas, ceux qui... comme c'est actuellement. Et ouais.
Component or even a residential building or an office. Prior to this experiment, I feel like we have seen more than enough data to make infrasound monitoring and regulation just as important as air or water quality, especially when you look at the studies pertaining to the cardiovascular effects. It's a very real environmental hazard that has been poorly understood and grossly understudied. And while I suspect that having a universally recognized safety threshold for infrasound might be an overly optimistic goal with a government that can't even enforce their own rules with Elon Musk's methane turbines, it can go a long way in both existing and future lawsuits that...
Et surtout, là, ce qu'il est en train de dire, c'est aussi c'est méga utile, mais pour le monde entier.
Seek remediation from problematic noise issues caused by data centers and infrastructure that is actively decreasing both the quality of life and health for those with the misfortune of living near them. I've already been in touch with peers to review and formalize this data, if not expand on it. But in the meantime, there are over 3,000 new data centers that are planned or already under construction.
3000 nouveaux centres qui sont en construction ou qui sont en train de se dire on va le faire quoi.
In the US alone. And right now is the time to have your local community and legislators set a standard for what's acceptable levels of power use, water use, air pollution, and noise and infrasound pollution. If you have a data center being built nearby your residence and the infrasound research in this video scares the shit out of you, now would be a great time to set up something like a Raspberry Shake and start storing a daily log of seismic and infrasonic activity. Because the vast majority of the responses to complaints and lawsuits is that there is no way of proving whether the infrasound wasn't already present before construction.
Ouais, alors par contre, je sais pas, là, le truc de dire, de sa conclusion, il est en train de dire, donc là, si vous avez un centre de données qui va être construit, utilisez un Raspberry, et puis comme ça, mais le truc c'est que non, empêchez que ce soit construit.
And even if your legislators have failed you and have no motivation to help your community, you can bet that class action attorneys certainly do. And once again, if you want to help make more research and content like this possible, or join an amazing community, or have access to a pool of music samples and field recordings and a whole bunch more, then my Patreon is for you, and you can join for as little as $1. Thanks for watching. Keep creating. Bye.
Ouais, bah en tout cas, merci beaucoup pour la vidéo, et puis bah, merci beaucoup Cosmic pour le conseil. C'était super intéressant. Et donc YouTube, je ne sais pas si cette vidéo sera une VOD, mais pourquoi pas. On peut tester. Et donc, juste le rappel, c'est vraiment partager cette vidéo, en tout cas pas forcément la mienne, même juste celle de Ben, sur le fait que ces data centers sont pas uniquement une catastrophe naturelle, c'est aussi en train ça va niquer nos vies. Comme disait avant Cosmic, est-ce que c'est peut-être faut qu'on parte sur cet angle-là de parler de notre santé pour intéresser les gens et renseignez-vous s'il n'y a pas des data centers dans vos côtés et merci d'avoir regardé.